our records. If we may have both of them brought up and collected again, there are some pages where Mr. Stewart's social security number, date of birth, and address are not completely whited out. And Your Honor, just based on his security, we would ask that both copies be brought up at this time and those issues be corrected.
Well, put something on there. Let's Mr. Charles, you hold on to your copy, don't let it out of your possession. Ms. Ellis, Ms. Strong, hold on to your copy, don't let it out of your possession. Then we'll have a hearing on it. I can go ahead and tell you that date of birth and address, I did not redact because of the University Medical Center records. If I missed the social security number, it was closely reviewed by my colleague and I. And if we missed it, we missed it, and we certainly want to make sure that that information is redacted, along with home phone number and personal cell phone number. So if we missed it, I'm depending on y'all to let me know that as officers of the court, and we will make sure that is redacted in your copies that you use, redacted in any copy that's up here. I don't know if any of these records will ever be presented to the jury. I just don't know. But we have an original set of copies and a redacted copy, and if there's further redaction needed, we'll address that. But let's get the jury back in here, and don't let those out of your possession to be reviewed by third parties any further until we have a chance to address that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. For our purposes, the description of the injury by accident on the admission of employee's right to compensation on the form, that's the most important thing, that this admission that this was an accident. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to be heard about being able to cross-examine the officer about his admission that this was an accident as part of this. But thank you. I'll sit down.
Thank you. All right, Sheriff, now let's bring the jury back in. All right, let the record reflect all our jurors are back in their seats. Next question.
Investigator McMaster, Corporal McMaster, what did you do after briefing CSI Jones on the crime scene?
Shortly after that, I learned that the suspect vehicle, the vehicle that was believed to have been involved in the incident where Officer Stewart was injured, had been located. I learned it had been located on Newcastle Drive.
What did you do upon learning that?
I contacted now Corporal Richards, at that time Investigator Richards, who was part of the homicide unit, asked him to proceed to that area to assist in any way that he could. Ultimately, he was directed and asked to prepare search warrants for the apartment and the vehicle.
What happened next?
At that point, I stayed on scene. I was still at the Forest Road location. Forensics was processing the scene, doing the things that they do. I learned from now Corporal Craig, at that time Investigator Craig, that there was potential witnesses to the incident. I asked that they be interviewed and taken to headquarters as well to be interviewed by Investigator West, who was a member of the homicide unit. Our standard procedure was to audio and videotape interviews related to homicides per general statutes, and we did that for all cases. So I actually had taken the 2 witnesses, Ms. Hypes and her coworker, to headquarters to have an interview completed as well.
And what did you do after that?
I was still on scene. I learned that the vehicle, again, had been located. Investigator Richards prepared a search warrant. I then began to assist, if it's the proper way to describe it, with forensic services.
How did you assist?
I stayed away and didn't handle evidence, but when there was a search that we needed to complete in the woods, in the wooded area for items that had been taken or missing from Investigator Stewart, I assisted with that search. There's an area in the apartment complex that we had canine search, we had multiple times, and we actually physically searched them ourselves as well, and I was involved with that.
What items were you searching for?
We were searching for Investigator Stewart's badge, his handcuffs, and his duty weapon.
Where did you look for these items?
Specifically, where Forest Road comes into the apartment complex, just to the east of that, there's a home or a private residence, and then there's a wooded area that follows along Forest Road, in between Forest Road and Interstate 85. There's a fence and a wooded area with a berm, and that travels down pretty much the length of the apartment complex. So I assisted in the search of that. Officer Muse was here earlier in the week. His dog went in there. We don't send a canine officer into a wooded area, into an area to search without another officer, essentially as a cover officer, in case someone is located or if something is located. Another officer that has essentially their hands free and not occupied with the dog can then take some action. I would have assisted him. I would have assisted Investigator Muse at that time, or Officer Muse.
What, if anything, did you find during that search?
Nothing was located.
And how long did this search go on for?
The area that I would have assisted with probably half an hour. That area in between Forest Road and I-85. We searched that area.
Did you direct that any other areas be searched for these items?
Yes, Investigator Muse searched then kind of searched the entire apartment complex, if you will. He searched other areas, not along that specific area where I was, but there's other open areas in that apartment complex.
And what, if anything, were found in those areas?
Again, nothing was located in those areas either.
What happened next?
The sheriff's office, I've learned that the sheriff's office has a dog that is trained more specifically for detection of explosives.
Objection as to what the sheriff's office dog has been trained.
Thank you. Overall, right now, I'll reserve that. Ladies and gentlemen, this evidence, this testimony, rather, it's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, only as to why this officer took what action this officer took. That's the explanation as to why this officer took whatever action the officer took in. All right, you can continue on with your answer.
I learned that the sheriff's office had a dog that was trained more specifically to locate explosives or gunpowder. The police department and myself requested that that dog be, if it was available, be sent to the scene to assist in hopes of finding any other shell casings, any ammunition, or the handgun. It was believed that that might assist. That dog arrived, searched the area.
And what, if anything, did that dog locate?
No items were located.
And describe the area where the sheriff's department dog was directed to search.
The same area where our dog, the Durham Police Department dog, had already searched. The area, the wooded area on top of the berm and then down between Forest Road and Interstate 85.
Were any items located on the scene?
Yes, on the scene, there were several items that had belonged to Investigator Stewart. There was a duty holster that is the one that we are issued in Special Operations Division, one that can slide inside your pants, kind of a pancake holster to hold, with the holster being on the outside. There was eyeglasses, a single shoe, a baseball hat, and a chain that I believe you saw earlier this week that appeared to have been broken, not unhooked, but broken in the middle.
Was that chain familiar at all to you?
It's familiar to me in the fact that I, at times, use the same type of item to hold a badge around
Objection to
my neck.
what he does, Your Honor?
Overruled. Go ahead with your answer.
The chain is one that is very similar to one that I would use and that other investigators and that I could reasonably believe Investigator Stewart was using.
Objection to what he reasonably
Sustained as to
believes.
that last part, but you disregard the last part as to what Officer Stewart might have done. The rest of the answer you may consider.
You can tell the court how you recognize the chain.
It's a chain that the Durham Police Department officers use, one like that, to hang a badge around your neck.
Was a badge located with this chain?
It was not.
What happened next?
Other forensics investigators arrived on the scene, to include Ms. Madry, who I had requested come back with, through Ms. Hutchins, with a metal detector to, again, continue to look for items of interest. The items that were missing were all heavily made up of metal. So it was a hope that, again, another search with a metal detector would help us locate those items.
And did the search with the metal detector yield any items?
It did not.
Did you look for any other items that may have been missing?
At some point, I learned that Investigator Stewart's personal cell phone was missing from his city vehicle.
What did you do upon learning that?
I attempted to find it. I looked inside the vehicle, saw that it was not there, saw where a charging cord was engaged and plugged into a power outlet with no telephone on the end of it. I shared that information with other officers, that his cell phone also was missing.
Was that phone eventually located?
It was.
Where was that phone located?
A few days later, I'm sorry, not a few days, the next day, it was found to be in the possession of Mr. Kleitz, who was here last week at the bicycle shop. Bullseye.
I object to the commentary about other testimony.
Thank you. Sustained. Next question.
What did you do upon learning that Investigator Stewart's phone had been located?
On that day, I was notified by other investigators within the Special Operations Division that the phone had been located. I traveled to the location where it was, and I interviewed.
What was that location?
It was the Bullseye bicycle shop. I think it's referred to as 5 Points downtown. Busy little intersection where the downtown loop used to kind of come through. I went there and interviewed Mr. Kleitz, along with Investigator Richards and Investigator Evans.
And when you arrived at Bullseye Bicycle Shop, were you able to retrieve the phone?
The phone was recovered, yes, ma'am.
And what did you do upon retrieving the phone?
I asked Mr. Kleitz where the phone had been, where he had come into contact or where he had received the phone. His explanation was that he was on a bike ride and that he had found the phone on Stadium Drive in 2 pieces, but he had picked up the 2 pieces.
What did you do upon learning that?
I completed my interview and drove directly to Stadium Drive to the area where I believed he had described he had located the phone in hopes of finding anything else connected to the case, to include the gun, the badge, and the handcuffs. Well, I'm sorry, the badge and the handcuffs I believe had already been recovered at that point to recover the gun.
What type of search did you employ to look for the missing gun?
My initial search was with people. Myself and the other 2 investigators went, we got out on foot and we began to walk the side of the road where Mr. Kleitz had stated he had found the phone. It clearly was a large area that needed to be searched, so I then contacted the K-9 unit and requested their presence to assist with the search.
And did they respond?
They did.
And what, if anything, else was found in that area?
In the area, we found a cell phone case or a clip that somebody might use to put a cell phone on their belt.
Was anything else recovered in that area?
No, ma'am.
Were metal detectors or any other search locators used in addition to the K-9 unit?
I don't believe so. I don't recall anything else.
What did you do next?
If we go back to the 18th, the date of the incident, I learned a short time after, well actually, let me stop. Miss Hypes and her coworker were brought back to the scene, to the apartment complex. I learned from Corporal Craig that Miss Hypes wished to speak with me. So I went into her office and spoke with her.
And what did you do next?
I interviewed Ms. Hypes. I asked her if she would tell me or wanted to tell me what had happened. She, to me, appeared frightened and nervous, very excited. We talked about the incident, what had happened, what she had seen. I confirmed that she had given written statements and collected those as well.
What did you do after speaking with Ms. Hypes?
Shortly after that, I learned and heard, I believe it was probably on the police radio. It's difficult to say whether it was a phone call or the police radio. There was a lot going on that day from both. I learned that officers were traveling to Rosetta Drive in hopes of finding the person we had identified at this point as Carlos Riley Jr. He was believed to have family on that street in that area. Officers were headed that direction. As such, I asked that I be kept informed if something was found or if someone was found.
Tell the court how you came to know the name of the suspect.
The piece of paper that Investigator Stewart had the tag number on it. We have the ability to run license plates through the state DMV system and come back to the registration. It came back to a Carlos Riley on Newcastle. Investigator Cristaldi, who is and was at the time a member of the homicide unit, I relayed that information to her to get her to do some research for me to find out as much as she could about an individual with that name and at that address. Investigator Cristaldi was familiar with that name, shared that information with me, and we began to proceed with locating that subject.
Did you locate Carlos Riley at Newcastle?
Carlos Riley Jr. was not located at the apartment on Newcastle or in the vehicle, the Nissan at Newcastle.
And so now let me turn your attention to Rosetta Drive. Did you respond to Rosetta Drive?
I did not. I was still at the original location on Forest Drive, Forest Point Apartments.
And what were you doing at this time at the original location?
My memory is that the processing of the scene and the work of forensics investigators was finishing or coming close to an end. But I stayed on scene to assist and to kind of just watch and see what was going on. Sergeant Pennica had asked me to stay there, so that was the best idea, as he went to the Newcastle address and supervised, if you will, that scene.
What happened next?
I received information that Mr. Riley had been located on Rosetta Drive along with two other individuals. They were taken into custody by officers who arrived on scene and found them in a dark colored black or dark green Honda Accord.
And about what time did this occur?
That was between 1:30 and 2, 1:45, maybe 1:30 to 2, somewhere in that time range.
And this is AM or PM?
It's PM, I'm sorry,
And what date was this?
on the 18th.
At this point, did the searches for the gun stop, or is there still a search ongoing for the gun?
There is today a search would occur for the gun, should we get information. So I'm not sure I understand the question exactly, but the search has not stopped because the gun has not been located.
Where else what other places were searched for the missing gun on December 18th and 19th?
On the 18th, I was involved personally with the search at the Forest Point Apartments. There was a search inside the vehicle and inside the apartment on Newcastle. There would have been canine officers, I've learned, searched that area as well, kind of the grounds, looking for items. And then on Rosetta, there was ultimately a search warrant completed on the home and the vehicle those days on the 18th. On the 19th, we again, as I stated earlier, searched the area of Stadium Drive for the gun. And then earlier in the day, prior to that, when the handcuffs and the badge had been located and that had been brought to our attention, there was more canine searches as well in the area of Newcastle, the apartments, Foxfire Apartments.
On December 18th at Newcastle, you mentioned that there was a search of the vehicle.
Correct.
Okay, and which vehicle would that be?
The maroon Nissan.
And what, if anything, was found in that car?
The shell case, or a spent shell casing, and an unfired round, unfired 45 caliber round, were located in that vehicle, along with the registration and other things that displayed ownership of the vehicle.
And then you referred to a search of the vehicle at Rosetta, and which vehicle were you referring to at that point?
That would be the dark colored Honda. It's dark green or black Honda, blue black, that Mr. Riley was in, along with his brother Ladarius Riley and their friend Dustin Portee at the time of their arrest.
point, was there a search at Food Lion?
There was, in interviewing him, we received information that Mr. Riley had possibly fled from the apartments on Newcastle over a fence potentially through a power line or a cut.
Could we have a limiting instruction on object?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another example of the evidence that's being, or the testimony that's being given right now by Officer McMasters is not for the truth of what was said, but to explain whatever action he took as a result of hearing these statements, whatever they are. Thank you. Or you may continue with your...
Thank you, sir. As you head from the Newcastle, the Foxfire Apartments on Newcastle, as you head north and west, you can go to Horton Road and to a Food Line. We received information and we had learned that Mr. Riley had fled to that location where he was picked up by his brother and Mr. Potpourri. So at Food Line, we didn't really search so much as we looked for videotape or any kind of recording that might demonstrate a dark-colored Honda picking up Mr. Riley. That's why we went to the Food Line. Now, subsequent to that, we did do a canine search, myself and Canine Officer Meade, from the location where the badge and the handcuffs were located, over that chain link fence, down the power line, all the way to the Food Line, and then back through kind of a walking trail or a bike trail back to the apartment complex, again, in hopes of locating the gun.
And what, if anything, did you find during that search?
We found nothing.
And were you able to retrieve any video from Food Line?
We were not. There was no video that demonstrated anything that was useful to us. There didn't appear to be cameras where we needed them.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
McMaster, you mentioned several searches. About how many people participated in these searches?
The searches would vary. They might start with myself and two other investigators, as the one on Stadium Drive did, but then ultimately we had 3 or 4 officers and canines. The searches at the scene, the original scene at Forest Point, could at times have 10 or 15, well, 4 or 5. A few days later, just another search that I helped and I led, I am currently, and at the time, one of the physical training instructors for the Durham Police Academy. As such, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6:30 a.m., we get together with whatever recruits we have in the academy. We run, we jump, we do push-ups, we do sit-ups. Immediately following one of those sessions, within the very close proximity to this incident, I took that entire group, which would have been Academy 36, probably in the neighborhood of 20 recruit officers, if you will, to that location to walk through the woods yet again in hopes of finding that gun. So the searches could be anywhere from 3 people to 20 to 25. to include canines.
Your Honor, Commissioner's approach to the witness.
Yes, ma'am.
Corporal McMaster, I am approaching you with what has been marked as State's Exhibit 18. Could you identify that for the court?
I can. It's an overhead view, a map that includes the area on Rosetta Drive and Trinity and Edward Street.
And would this map assist you in illustrating your testimony today?
It will.
Your Honor, the state moves to admit State's Exhibit 18 into evidence for illustrative purposes.
All right, thank you. State's Exhibit 18 is admitted for illustrative purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state moves at this time to publish this exhibit to the jury.
Allow.
And Your Honor, may the witness step down.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Corporal McMaster, I'm going to ask you to take this pen and if you could mark on that map the areas that were searched.
During this investigation, the first initial several days actually, I did not respond to Rosetta Drive. I was made aware of through the officers that arrived on scene and found the three gentlemen in a Honda that the car was on the street in this general area. Ultimately, there was a search warrant that was done on this address, this vehicle, and the areas surrounding it. So, if you will, in this area.
And you mentioned the canines and the police academy that also did searches.
The searches that we did with the canine and the police academy were actually back on Forest Drive. So I did not bring the police academy to this location. This would have been done by Investigator Richards' search warrant, the officers that responded to the scene, the forensics units, and canine that would have responded or that did respond to this area. But I did not personally go to that location.
Thank you so much. Corporal McMaster, I'm going to ask you to stand there. And Corporal McMaster, I am now displaying what has previously been admitted as State's Exhibit number 1. And if you could mark on this map the area that was searched near Forest Drive.
Okay. The entrance to the apartment complex is here. There's a residence here. The bulk of the searching was in this area that I assisted with here. Canine in my direction did search these other areas. This is where the Durham Police Academy searched and assisted, all in this area, as well as the Durham County Sheriff's Office canine searched this area and some surrounding maybe into here as well.
Right, thank you so much. You've mentioned several items that were located and seized as a result of this case, specifically the handcuffs, the badge, Investigator Stewart's badge, and some other items. Were those items tested for DNA?
Items were sent to the state lab for testing. It's my understanding that the testing was not completed prior to this proceeding.
Your Honor, objection, like to be heard, sidebar. Motion to strike.
Thank you. If you'd like to approach, be back in condition.
The objection is sustained, ladies and gentlemen. We would disregard the last answer that Officer has to get. Thank you. Now, Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Your Honor. Corporal McMaster, you mentioned earlier that there was a search from the apartment complex on Newcastle up Horton Road and to the Food Lion.
Correct.
Would a map help illustrate that testimony?
It would.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
Yes.
And Your Honor, may the witness step down.
Yes, sir.
And Corporal McMaster, you are standing near State's Exhibit 15. Can you identify that report?
I can. It's an overhead map view of the Newcastle Road area with Foxfire Apartment and the Strawberry Hill Apartments.
Would this map help in illustrating your testimony?
Partially.
And could you denote the parts on the map that are visible and would help illustrate the areas that were searched?
Sure. The pool house here that we've referenced to where the handcuffs and the badge located is approximately in this area right here. You can see the pool, this light blue area. So from here, and unfortunately, the area where the food line is would be about here on this map. So heading north and west, there is Horton Road up here and the food line here at the intersection. So we tracked or attempted to track and searched with the K-9 officer over a fence in this direction, kind of going upward or north and west as this map would continue.
Thank you so much. And there is a portion of Stadium Drive that is here as well. Does this map contain any other portions of Stadium Drive that were searched or aren't items?
The portion of Stadium Drive where I specifically was involved with the search and where the cell phone was recovered and the K-9 searches were initiated on my request would actually be farther south down here, unfortunately.
So those approximately, if you know, how many miles south would they be?
I would say from the location here where the Nissan was recovered in this general area to the Stadium Drive area would be, or where the phone was recovered, within 2 miles.
Thank you so much. May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, those are all my questions.
Thank you. Questions of the witness, Mr. Charles?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Corporal McMaster.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you.
There are crime scene field notes that are prepared in this case, weren't there?
By myself or by forensics investigators?
By both.
I don't know if you would characterize my notes as forensics or crime scene field notes. They were notes that I took as I was on scene and as I progressed through an investigation.
And there was a gunshot residue testing of Mr. Carlos Antonio Riley Jr., correct?
Correct.
Your direction.
There was.
And of Officer Stewart, correct?
That is correct.
And each, there was a gunshot residue information form done for both gentlemen, correct?
I would assume there was. I did not complete either collection, so I cannot say certainly. I did not perform the gunshot residue test myself.
But you received the results, correct?
I received, as well as the district attorney's office, a copy of the results from the state crime lab. Yes, sir.
And as part of that, you received the gunshot residue information form, correct?
That would have been returned to the Durham Police Department's Property and Evidence Unit, sir.
And you have access to the Property and Evidence Unit, don't you?
I do.
And you received information early on that there were 3 shots, correct?
I don't recall that. I recall you saying that this morning, and that's something that does not stand out in my mind as hearing 3 shots.
And you were told that in part of your investigation that the belief was he was shot.
Our initial response and the initial information, we didn't know for sure. We had no idea. We clearly knew that Investigator Stewart was injured from a gunshot, but initially for the first hour, we did not know if Mr. Riley was injured as well.
I'm talking about your interview at the hospital of the gentleman sitting at the table, Officer Stewart. He told you there were 1 to 3 shots and that he might have been shot, didn't he?
Sir, I don't know what interview of Investigator Stewart you're referring to. I did not interview him on the 18th. I made contact with him on the 19th long enough to find that he was under the influence of pain medicine and did not interview him.
And then in one of the search warrant applications, it stated that there was a chase in the woods.
I've seen that. Yes, sir.
And you didn't call in the SBI in this case, did you?
The SBI actually was there with us, sir, when we initially responded to the scene. The SBI...
You don't work for the SBI, do you?
Whoa. Let me just, have you finished your answer?
I have not.
Finish your answer, then we'll go on to the
The information I received from the SBI special agent on scene who was there, who was at Durham Police Headquarters to have a meeting with me that obviously was interrupted, said that the SBI would not be investigated. That was the information I received from Special Agent Carter.
And the police chief and yourself did not request the SBI to investigate this, did you?
I did not.
And you received a request to preserve all evidence in this case, didn't you?
I don't recall ever receiving a request to preserve all evidence at any point.
And you didn't preserve all evidence in this case, did you?
I preserved the evidence that I believed and used, that I believed to be important, and that was important to the case.
As an advocate, you're an advocate, aren't you, sir?
For justice.
You're an advocate for this gentleman sitting right there, aren't you?
No more than I would for you, sir.
You didn't direct anyone to take a gunshot residue testing of the wastebasket where the badge and cuffs were found, did you?
That is correct.
And I may approach our brief sidebar.
Good. Everybody will be back with you in just a second. Mark, when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Corporal McMaster, there was earlier testimony that Mr. Riley was taken to police headquarters, is that correct?
It is.
And you did not personally sit in on the interview with my client, did you?
That is correct.
And he didn't have an attorney in that interview, did he?
He did not.
And there was two investigators present, correct?
There was.
Someone from the SBI.
Correct.
And SBI is North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, correct?
That is correct.
And they, in other cases, perform the entire investigation when there's an investigation that involves an officer, correct?
I can't comment specifically on the State Bureau of Investigation's procedures. I can tell you from my experience investigating officer-involved incidents with the Durham Police Department, there is essentially at times, three parallel investigations going on. One being myself or someone from the homicide unit investigating for criminal purposes, one by the Professional Standards Division, or what is commonly referred to as the Internal Affairs Division, and then, if necessary and if requested by the chief, one by the State Bureau of Investigation. Three independent yet parallel investigations.
And for example, the Huerta and Ocampo cases, the SBI, the State Bureau of Investigation investigated those cases, correct?
They did.
And the Durham Police Department did not do a criminal investigation that was parallel in those cases, correct?
That is not correct.
So you did your own in those cases, the SBI did another investigation.
It's correct.
Testimony. Thank you. And how long did the interview with Mr. Carlos and Antonio Riley last?
I do not know. Hours, I would say. I'd say it would be safe to say an hour to an hour and a half.
But you weren't present?
I was at times present watching a live feed of the interview, but I had other responsibilities and other things that I was doing at the same time.
And there was pictures at your direction taken of Officer Stewart's face that day, correct?
I didn't specifically request that Officer Stewart's face be photographed. I requested that the Forensic Services Unit do what they would normally do and take photos to document injuries and a victim overall.
But you're aware at some point that there was an allegation of punching to the face?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So are you aware that pictures were taken by the forensic unit?
I've seen pictures that were taken. Yes, sir.
So how many pictures were taken in this case?
I have no idea, sir. I would hate to even guess.
A lot.
A lot. Yes, sir. I think that's a fair estimate.
And getting back, I guess, to the question about whether you're a neutral investigator in this particular investigation involving Officer Stewart, is it your contention that you're a neutral investigator investigating this matter involving Officer Stewart?
Sir, I understand your concern. I do. My answer to that is yes. I am a police officer. That is my job. Regardless of who the alleged victim is, regardless of who the alleged suspect is, my job is to investigate that crime and that incident fully. And everyone that I have been part of has gotten my full attention.
The question is, are you a neutral, detached investigator as if you didn't know and it wasn't a police officer involved in this case? Are you as neutral in this case as you are in some other case where you don't? It's not a police officer.
Hold it, everyone, everybody, hold on. We're going to let you ask that question again. At my request, the jurors were instructed to let us know if there were something that might interfere with viewing, hearing, or anything of that nature. They followed that direction to the T. And I'm gonna, now let, Mr. Charnes ask his question again.
So, in this case, where an officer received a gunshot wound to his thigh, you're as neutral in this case as you would be if it's someone you didn't know and wasn't an officer. Is that your testimony?
That it is a police officer that is the victim or that received the gunshot wound certainly plays on your senses. At the end of the day, we have to put these things aside and investigate. So, and at that, the Durham Police Department is made up of approximately 500 police officers. I know by face most of them. At that time, I knew Investigator Stewart to say hello to. I had no personal relationship with him. I knew him as nothing other than a Durham police officer. He did not get any different treatment than any other victim would.
You didn't get any other treatment as any victim would. Did you just say that?
Not for purposes of the investigation. He got no special treatment from me and in my direction of an investigation. No, sir. I stand by that statement.
And didn't you just a moment ago call this gentleman the victim in this case?
Yes, sir.
And isn't that what the jury's here to determine?
Objection.
Well,
Is that a question?
Yes, it is a question.
It is, but in the process of investigating an incident, we, for purposes of management, if nothing else, label people as victims, suspects, involved others, witnesses, things like those type of titles and tags go to people. In this instance, through my investigation, I felt that the most appropriate title and way to identify Investigator Stewart as a victim of a gunshot wound.
I approached the clerk to get some exhibits.
yes, sir.
Looking at the time, Your Honor, as I sometimes do, it's a curious time. I don't see the Cheshire Cat out there, but if there was one, it would. Court's instruction, it's a sealed up State's Exhibit 40.
Yes.
I might deal with that. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
It's my job.
Your Honor, may I proceed to open this further
Let me do
in the
it
interest
for
of
you.
justice?
Let me do that for you.
Thank you.
Sure. I think we've opened it sufficiently for you to examine what's inside there.
Thank you. May I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Handing you Corporal State's Exhibit 40A, if you take a look and tell me if you've seen that before.
I have?
And that is the piece of paper where Officer Stewart wrote down a plate number at the bottom right, correct?
That is correct.
And your understanding, you were the lead investigator, there was no call by Officer Stewart to call this into communications at the time of the stop, correct?
That is correct.
And he chose to write the tag number on a little piece of paper right there, that exhibit, correct?
8.5 by 11, yes, sir.
Well, you could hold up that exhibit and show the jury, is the plate number 8.5 by 11 down there, Bobby? You can hold that
The
up.
piece of paper is not a little piece of paper, but it is written small here.
And that was a violation of the general orders of the Durham Police Department, the radio communications, by not calling this in, correct?
That is the policy of the Durham Police Department.
It was a violation of the policy of the Durham Police Department, radio communications, to not call in the stop, correct?
Sir, I've answered that. That is the policy to radio in, and I've also indicated that he did not do that.
Thank you, sir. Now retrieve that exhibit. May I approach again, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Could you read off, there's a, looks like a timestamp and a date at the top of that same exhibit? What does it say?
Sir, the date is 12/18/2012. The timestamp is 9:54 and 19 seconds a.m.
And what's it say at the top?
In the top left corner it says guest list : in-house.
Thank you. Sir, may I approach the clerk, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our midday recess now. Please remember the admonitions I've given you previously, not to communicate with each other or anyone else about the case, not to allow anyone to talk about the case in your presence. Do not talk to or have any contact with any parties, attorneys, or witnesses. Do not conduct any investigation or receive or attempt to receive any reports or information related to the case from any source, and do not form or express an opinion about the case. You'll be sure to leave your hats and pins there in your seats. Remember to wear your badge that reflects your special status as yours, so that others will know not to do something in your presence that might cause you to have to bring it to the bailiff to my attention. And with all that being said, while everyone else remains seated, the jury is excused until 2:30. Thank you. All right, any matters we need to address while the jury is out before we commence our recess?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Charles.
I have a Chief Jose L. Lopez subpoena update. My law partner can tell what he's done. Last I checked, did not receive a response to my email requesting the chief to be here. There was to be here at 10 a.m. Mr. Donovan can tell you what he did in response. My understanding is that unlike the common practice in Durham, the requested practice by the sheriff, and we might want to get the folks in here to confirm this, when we're serving the Durham Police Department, we give the sergeant the subpoena, because I was told that in the sheriff's office that the city prefers us doing that. It's easier, they know about it faster, So I was doing what the high elected sheriff, the high sheriff asked me to do. And Mr. Donovan, as a public defender for years and years and years and years and years and years, knows that procedure, and he would like to tell Your Honor what he did with the subpoena after it appears that the chief is not honoring the subpoena in that way.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Thank you, Judge. Just want to tell the court I brought 2 copies of the subpoena down to the first floor civil division of the sheriff's department, handed 2 copies to the young lady there, and have her initial and date a 3rd copy for our notes. So in other words, I served a subpoena through the sheriff, which is not how it's usually done, of course, but appears to be the way that the chief is requesting. So in an effort to cover all our bases, I did that this morning.
And the subpoena that you had served on the sheriff, on the chief, was for what time, when, that sort of thing?
10 a.m. Today, Your Honor.
And was this, when you delivered it to the sheriff, was that after 10 a.m.?
It was, Your Honor. Yes, it's the same subpoena that originally went out, just a photocopy of it, the stamped photocopy of the stamped copy.
And so at this juncture, it's in the hands of the sheriff's department to serve on the Durham Police Department, on the chief.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, sir. That's my understanding.
All right. Thank you.
If, Mr. Donnelly, could you tell the court what time this was presented to the sergeant in the normal course of issuing subpoenas last Friday?
And Judge, I don't have a specific recollection of when I did it on Friday, but I think it would have been before court, although I don't want to put my foot down too hard because I don't have a clear recollection. However, it is stamped at 9:33 a.m., so that was when it was file stamped at the clerk of the Superior Court.
All right, and it was you, Mr. Donovan, that gave it to a sergeant?
Sergeant French?
Sergeant French?
Yes, sir.
At the Durham Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That would be our showing on that subpoena, and I would, again, like to use those documents to cross-examine this gentleman on the stand. Also, at the appropriate time, I'd like to be heard about the workers' comp records, Brady materials that I'd like to cross-examine Officer Stewart about at the appropriate time after Mr. Corporal McMaster is finished.
Thank you. So the last piece that's missing is whether the sheriff's department has yet served on the chief, as I see it.
Yes, sir.
And we'll just stay alert to the next update. Thank you very much. We'll be in recess until 2:30.
Court's on recess till 2:30.